Of the hundreds of prospects that we expect to be selected in each NFL draft, no position gets discussed more than the quarterbacks. They're the engines of any prolific NFL offense, the deciders of a franchise's fate, and the difference between failure and success. All 32 franchises will look at least a little at quarterback, and many will pour over a film for hours on end, even if you swear your GM makes his decisions off of Madden draft files. It takes a lot for a player to actively stand out against the noise, which is something that Washington quarterback Michael Penix has done this last season. You may know him because of his immaculate game against Texas, because he's the guy with the funny name, or because he torched the Pac-12 this season. Some scouts would argue that Penix has earned his way into the first round. Some are just flat out crazy, and some wouldn't touch him with a 10-foot pole. Today, I hope to give you some insight on how you feel when your team inevitably trades up to pick him this April. So, what's the deal with Penix? Michael Penix just finished a fantastic campaign with Washington, passing for 4,903 yards, 36 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions, leading the Huskies to a Sugar Bowl victory and a national championship appearance. Obviously, if you're putting numbers up like this, something has to be there. He's garnered some comparisons to Tua because all left-handed people are soul-bound, but I think their playstyles are actually completely different. For one, Penix has an elite-level arm and can access just about every reasonable part of the field, even off-platform. His throwing motion and velocity are very Stafford-esque, which allowed Washington to have one of the country's highest flying offenses. Outside the numbers, Penix showcased very consistent production. Penix flashes potential to escape free rushers and will often find outlets to avoid incoming pressure. Penix is decisive within his system. He operates with the definite confidence that is needed to sit behind center, and he utilizes his otherworldly arm to dice defenses up. While he does seem to have good escapability, talks about his movement and propensity to stay inside the pocket lead us into our main red flags section. The number one talking point that you'll hear about Michael Penix this year is his unique injury history. Penix has suffered 4 season-ending injuries in consecutive seasons at Indiana, and while he mostly avoided injury while at Washington, there's no telling what could happen if Penix gets hurt in the league. This is especially concerning considering his 2 compounding ACL injuries in the same leg. Availability is the best ability, and I imagine a lot of coaches won't even consider drafting Penix because of this. Secondly, Penix is a lot like Will Levis, but instead of having a fear of milk, he actually has a fear of the middle of the field. Penix really struggled this season throwing in the intermediary, especially inside the numbers. This is probably because he is susceptible to interior pressure and can sometimes fade away from pressure instead of staying tall in the pocket. Quicken mechanics and back foot lofts are the bane of any quarterback coach and lead to a lot of bad throws and even turnovers. A lot of teams have bad interior lines and even more rely on the intermediate ball to set up their offense, especially digs, curls, and crossers. I would like to note that this very well could just be an issue with Washington's play calling this season, but if the timing was messed up by press coverage or if the play wasn't perfectly schemed up, Washington really struggled to get anything out of Penix within 20 yards over the middle of the field. If Penix can't improve on this pass, he may be a play caller's worst nightmare, severely limiting the playbook available. Trying to give Penix a full-fledged comp is really difficult. I mentioned Stafford earlier, mostly based off aesthetics, but Penix lacks a lot of the nuance that Stafford had, even whenever coming out of Georgia. Tua is a pretty funny comparison, but I think is pretty wrong. In terms of prospects, I find him very similar to last year's CJ Stroud. And before I get lambasted by everybody, let me explain. As a prospect, CJ Stroud was super frustrating. He had a really good skill set and a very, very fun arm, but didn't show anything really special throughout the regular season. There was no wow factor or it factor outside of a few beautiful passes, which compared to Bryce Young made him a de facto QB2. This all changed though in the Georgia game, where he showed that he actually could do all the things that we thought he couldn't do throughout the season, especially making off-script plays. His tape was amazing overall in this game, but 1 game sample sizes are not enough to really evaluate a guy. Penix really popped during that Texas game, really dicing up the middle of the field, which is something that he had not done throughout the season. And if you can get that fear of franchise week in and week out, I think Penix is going to be great for your team. The question really lies in whether or not Penix was propped up by the talent in the system around him, or if he was actually limited in showing that he has that next gear. It'll be up to the coaching staff that takes him to decide whether or not they can really transform him into a next level player. It's a difficult transition from college to the NFL with very few chances to prove you belong. And for Penix, probably more than anyone, there is a Raiders edge between boom and bust.